So I'm so excited today to really be launching, first of all, School of Self-Worth and our first guest, because really for me, when I thought about this project and I thought about who I wanted to have in this conversation, Octavia totally came up as like someone I'm like, she is the person to have this conversation with, because really watching your growth and who you are, and even going back to, we were just chatting briefly before this started around our initial connection is and watching your growth over the last decade, because Octavia and I met years and years ago at a Lululemon summit. We were both ambassadors. We both went to Whistler, Canada for this 3 day
Hmm.
growth event and connected there very much. And then afterwards, actually, I think you were one of my very first, I air quote clients, because you weren't really a client. You were in my first cohort of people I was leading through coaching. And that's really where we had a much deeper connection. And then I've watched her expansion since then through writing books, really creating this beautiful message of rest in the world, and also watching you grow as a wife and a mother and all of these pieces. And so I'd love to really even start from that point, because we were just talking about how 10 years ago, 10 years is both a really long time and not a long time. So I'm curious what your
Mm.
perspective is on that, Octavia, even just from the very beginning.
So my perspective first, thank you for having me here, Nicole. And when you said I think you said School of Self-Worth,
Mhm.
because that title had dropped out of my mind. I said, oh, right. Self-worth, right? That's the journey. Like that's the remembering that is ours to do. And 10 years ago, I was very much into visioning and goal setting at the 10-year level. And I just remembered that when it came out of my mouth. And and what I do remember about the process of spending time getting still, quiet, daydreaming first, then we would journal after. I know you probably remember this process that was really, in this one way, seemingly short and benign, but can just be an accelerant for how you move forward in the world. And so I remember this one event with Lululemon that I went to, visioning and goal setting. It was at the beginning of the year. It might have been like 2012 or 11 or 13. I can't remember the exact year. And we spent 10 minutes visioning. Someone was like reading a script. Then we spent 5 minutes journaling, and the guidance was something like, your wildest dreams, you don't even know how it could happen. And I remember writing, seeing something in the vision, writing something down, and then working that backwards. So like writing down the 10-year vision, the 5-year vision, the 3-year vision, the 1-year vision, the 6 month. What am I going to do in a day? But here's the thing, Nicole, what I remember about that time period in my life is some of what I thought could happen in 10 years. Once I got really clear, intentional, and kept revisiting it, it happened in 2 or 3 years. So what I remember about 10 years ago is that I was in this moment of realizing possibility. And what was causing me to realize possibility was this brilliant combination of stillness, movement, momentum, like this kind of cyclical process that I started to engage in with far more intention. And also what began to propel me forward is who I decided to spend my waking time with. I don't know if I had ever realized how important it was to, if you want to move out of stagnation, to make connections with people who abide within some level of flow. And so 10 years ago feels like a lifetime ago in terms of um, what was just burgeoning in my mind and my body and my awareness. Um, and it also feels like a blip ago.
Well, I love what you share, because that is still what I work with people on, is that 10-year vision, that idea of like what it
Yeah,
look like in the future. And then I
yeah.
love how you were like, it came true in 2 or 3 years. Like, how remarkable that it all happened so quickly.
And on some level, it feels like magic. And I'm hella woo and also hella strategic. And so I think it's a combination of all of that. But I just remember realizing the power of intention, the power of the word, the power in visioning. But so I went on a walk today before this because I wanted to like just reflect and remember. And I was thinking about being in that first cohort of people you coached. And this exercise came forward that you gave us then that deeply impacted my life. And you gave us this exercise of interviewing people to upgrade us. And the exercise, I don't remember the exact questions, but you essentially asked us to ask people who and what they saw. But you gave us the specific guidance to ask people that we knew would upgrade us. And I think at the time you were like, think about Apple phone 2.0. That's how far ago it was. It was like
You're bringing
Apple
us
2.
way back.
You were like, who's going to be like, who's going to tell you the thing that helps you believe in Octavia 2.0? And um, I don't remember all the questions. What I do remember is asking choosing my mom to be one of the people. And this seems so basic on this one level, but she was like, really, baby, I want you to know that anything you choose to focus on, you can make that happen. And that seems so simple. And I have revisited it, because one thing that shifted in 10 years is my mom is no longer alive. And that interview, I still have it written down. I still have her answers. Um, and I remember going through all the questions with her, and I don't remember every single answer without looking, but what the feeling I remember is like, wow, here's someone who absolutely believes in me. And who's also seen me like fail and stumble and make all kind of mistakes and be completely disagreeable. And the shift that occurred just in that simple act of asking people to say, tell me the greatest possibilities you see for me. Um, so you gave us that exercise. And Nicole, what I want you to know is I remember that moment being in that circle with you as just full of promise and possibility. And also I was like, I don't really know what I'm doing. Like, what's this about? What's a coach? Right? Like, how does this help or shift? Because what we were doing most of the time was being an inquiry, being reflective, sharing truths. What's the story we've been telling? What's the story we want to tell with our lives? That's what we were doing. And this pragmatic part of me was like, how is this supposed to help me? And it absolutely did.
Well, I love everything that you're sharing because I feel like that is, I mean, it was, 10 years ago, it was like before there were so many coaches in the world. And doing that work to me, I didn't even think of it probably then as coaching, more as like guidance or helping to lead people. And I love that you
Mm,
really were able to see so much for yourself out of that. And I really actually want to go
mm,
back to the interview you had with your mom because I'm curious for you, because really I'm curious about, your journey into the message you really shared today around rest. And I'm curious about
mhm,
how that vision and having that sight of like, okay, there are things that are open for me, the possibility is open. How did you really for yourself start to gain and claim in self worth to follow it? Because I think sometimes a lot of people might have a big dream or they have these things that they want, and they're not really sure how to take ownership of themselves in a way to actually say, oh, yeah, I get to
mm,
actually have that. Because I think it can be different to say, I get to have that versus, oh, that's just a dream I'm going to let sit there.
mm. That is a beautiful question. And I want to like feel into it. I want to say something true. I think I was born a dreamer. A. And I come from a long line of dreamers. And I don't mean that in terms of my family. I'm thinking about Langston Hughes and all of his poetry on dreams. I'm thinking about Dr. Martin Luther King, who I have a dream. That speech has become so commercialized, and it still stands as one of the most profound pieces of writing and an exemplar of like what it means to cast an expansive vision boldly. Right. And so I have that as part of my kind of cultural lineage. I also have a mother who, despite it all, because I grew up in a very acute kind of poverty, like she fed us dreams. Like when there was nothing else, we dream. And then I also have the cultural legacy of being devalued and diminished and silenced and all these things that kind of shrink how one experiences self in the world and what one thinks is possible. And so within my being, these things have been fighting, right? Been dancing a tumultuous dance with one another. And I believe many of prayers have been prayed for for me to survive that level of internalized battle. And I have to say that rediscovering or discovering yoga in 1999, this practice that calls one into relationship with their body, the mind, the heart, with who and what you actually are within this memory of who you are and were before the world told you who you were supposed to be. My yoga practice was a place that began to restore the pieces of worth that I felt had been diminished by the acculturation and devaluation of my selfhood as a Black woman. And um, and that seems like out there. How can yoga do that? And it could do it because I needed it to. I was like, I need something. I didn't have access to therapy when I started yoga in 1999, but I had access to a student yoga pass at the studio, a mile from my university. And so that's what I did. And that was back in the day when mirrors were at the front of the room. There might still be mirrors at the front of the room. I don't know. But every studio I went to had lots of mirrors in it. And there was something about standing at the beginning of the class, looking myself in the eye, and first just seeing my conditioning, seeing the projections that came at me, but the practice being 90 minutes and staring at myself long enough until something else could be revealed. And so for me, to shorten this very long story, having a practice and a ritual that called me back to my whole self that I return to essentially daily on some level. It looks different now, but I return to it daily and have for decades, has been essential in me doing what Langston Hughes said, which is hold fast to dreams. For when dreams die, life is a broken winged bird that cannot fly. Hold fast to dreams. For when dreams go, life is a barren field frozen with snow. I know that poem because I memorized it when I was a little girl, right? So I really walked with the power of dreams and the power of remembering the the cultural capacity to dream, even in the midst of the nightmare that it can be to live in a marginalized body in this world. I don't know if I answered your question. I feel like you asked like, well, what made you be one who would go after the dreams, um, versus just have it in my head. And I really, it seems out there to be like, well, we have a model of Martin Luther King, who against every odd, like I'm like, there were for me some very profound models. And before it was a known statement, this idea of I am my ancestors' wildest dream, like I feel like I just encountered that, in, I don't know, the last few years. I didn't know that when I was doing this work with you. I didn't know those words when I was coming up as a young girl, in the exactness of those words. I did come from a place where my family and my community loved me as if I was a wild dream. You know, even in our flaws, it was not perfect, but I'm sitting in that kind of awareness of my heritage. Um, and then maybe Nicole, some people are born dreamers. It just like not trying, not giving myself possibility and opportunity just has not been an option for me. But I also think some parts of the world I came from was so hard and so challenging to be in that dreaming was the way out. And I also understood that I had to do something. You know, I can't just have the vision. I gotta do something with the vision. I gotta activate it. I gotta enroll other people in it. You know, like, and so more might come up as we keep talking about like, well, what was my how? But the main how is like the ritual to remember who I am. Because we have 1,000 ways to forget every single day, most of them at our fingertips via, you know, social media and all those things.
Yeah. What you shared is so beautiful, and I love how you said that dreaming was the way out for you and that you really saw that. And I also really heard so deeply and felt very deeply when you said, you know, I am my ancestors' wildest dream, because I find so often with women, and I work with high achieving women, professional women, where the dream tends to be like, oh, too scary to pursue, you know, like too much to pursue, like it
Mm,
requires too much to overcome to actually say, I'm going to step
mm,
outside the lane that I've been in my whole life to choose
mm,
something a little differently. And sometimes that there's like a lack of urgency almost, you know, and I think that you and I are both come from yoga traditions where, you know, I'm like, when we're really present in the moment, it's like we only have this moment, this time. And I'm curious for you, like in there, if you experience that or see that from others, or if people ask you about that urgency for you around, you know, to me, dreams are the way out is so beautiful. And so many people get stuck along the way, because I'm sure you know many of those people too who get stuck on that precipice of like, can I really pursue my dreams? And what do you say to yourself, or what practices support you, or what do you think about in those moments?
mm. You know, a thing I also was remembering when you were speaking is um, how one defines success. And what has been essential for me is to figure out my own terms for it. That's the real dream. And I'm not saying that that was easy because I think from where I'm from, like going to college was the dream. I'm a first generation college graduate and all of those kinds of things. Those were the dreams. And I am glad that I honored that kind of collective and communal dream. Like when I graduated, it was like I had made it in this one sense. And I also remember upon graduation from undergrad, being like entering this state of peril in this one sense because I could immediately see that I could become the person who's constantly pursuing more degrees because that's what I'm supposed to do. I'm a learner, to be clear. Like I'm a lifelong learner. I will be learning until I'm 100 years old. But I also had to have some self discipline and say, I don't actually want to keep pursuing those things. I constantly ask myself, what do I actually want? Because for me, like the dream is like, what is it that I actually want to do? What am I here to actually do? You know, I'm constantly questioning not myself, but if I'm like, ooh, if I'm comparing and now I got to go try to do that thing, well, is that my thing to do? Do I want to do that? Or do I see someone else doing it? Do I see someone else having it? And thus I feel like I should have it. Or now that's my new measure of success. Um, and so my actual dreams don't feel too big for me. When I am dreaming someone else's dream, I get completely overwhelmed. If I go, like, if I can start to decide, like, you know, if I'm like, I want that because Nicole has it, that sends my nervous system into a state of chaos. Like, I become really dysregulated in the pursuit of something that is not mine to be pursuing. So for me, the question becomes, how do I access the clarity? Um, how do I let myself, how have I let myself desire what I actually didn't want to desire? I don't know if that makes sense. And that's been my work to be like, what do I want? What does it actually cost? What am I willing to pay? Okay, what do I want? Like these are questions I'm asking over and over and over and over. Um, I'm going to pause right there.
Yeah. Well, I love what you're sharing because you're actually asking yourself and questioning which, to me, I'm always like there's two different voices in my head, right? And so there's always like which one am I listening to? And I love that you have a way of questioning, is this actually for me? And I get to in defining
Mm,
success for yourself. I also really heard that for you, like you're the one who's deciding what the barometer of success is. And then when you do that,
mm,
and then you can listen to the voice that's actually going to determine what is the right way for you, what works for you, what versus the one that, like you said, dysregulates you. And I see that all the time too. We get very stressed, we compare, we think that someone else's dream
mm,
is your dream. And it doesn't
mm.
even matter which industry you're in. Like I think about how
That's right.
my success looks nothing like your success because we are two separate humans with our own pathways to follow and
Mm,
it will look completely different. So I'm curious if that is part
mm,
of it for you. It's like to really make that
mm,
distinction. And then because I like
mm,
to layer in more, and I'm curious where rest comes in there for you because I know that's such a big piece of it, because we are so
mm,
dysregulated. We live in this world where we're on social media all the time, and people are probably listening to this while they're doing something else, and we're always in the state of
mm,
activation, right? Whereas gosh, I'm like
mm,
Liz, like I'm super overstimulated all the time too, and I really actively
mm.
try not to be. So what could you share about that place? Like how does it support you to be in the pursuit of dreams? Because pursuit of dreams actually still is a very activated state in certain ways, to do things and be in the world and putting your message out there. And how do you balance all of those pieces?
Yeah, I think it's essential to. I think I started this conversation by saying access the vision. I didn't say access the whole plan. One of my mentors and coaches would always say, if you already know the how is too small. you know, and I'm like, and I'm a planner, right? Like I like
I want you to say
plans.
that louder for
Um,
everybody.
I'm a planner. I like plans, and as part of my like training, I was an educator for 10 years, and that really served me, and serves me. And in the realm of dreams, if I know all the details, then it's not a dream. I think at that point, it's a goal, right? It's something a little smaller than a grand vision. Um, and so rest comes in because, well, how do you access the the desire? How do you access the vision? Where's your vision coming from if it's not coming? Rest helps us access what's on the inside and get very clear on like what's in here and how it got there versus where'd that come from. Did that come from that or that podcast or that thing? Where did that actually come from? And so for me, rest doesn't ask anything of me, which is refreshing and can also be daunting when we're used to being asked of and being able to deliver. Engaging something that is like just come here and lay down and be is a whole practice, and it is also why it must be a practice because we know how to do, we don't know how to be, and all the juice of living is really in remembering how to be. And so let's just take a simple rest practice. For some people, their meditation practice might be that. I think about rest. I button a lot of things up into the term rest, but it is anything that restores you to a state that feels grounded and steady. If you say you live on, say, 15, something that's restful for you might take you down to 13 or 10, right? I'm not always talking about zero, though. Sometimes we need to get back to zero. For me, the rest practices are yoga nidra, right? Which some people define as yogic sleep. Restorative yoga, which is a yoga practice of being supported in deep relaxation. And then meditation, that for me is just sitting and paying attention. That's one way I kind of define it or think about it. And it is in those moments that I access the absolute most clarity. And the way I used to lead a 200-hour yoga teacher training, and the title was something like "Be Still, Then Make Moves." And me and my co-leader, that entire training was rooted in this primary tenet that the best, most empowered, well-informed movements of your life must come from stillness. And so we didn't start that training with, and here's how you teach these asanas. Right? We started that with, here's how you start to befriend stillness, minute by minute, moment by moment. So then you're going to gain more insight about how to move and how to be in the movement from being still. And then at some point, of course, you got to get up and you actually got to go move. And so rest supports me in clarifying, discerning what is mine to do, how I want it to feel, how I want to do it. I also access incredible strategy. Like sometimes I cannot figure something out in my kind of super waking, activated state. And I'll just start to pull everything back, and then, there's the solution to how to do that. There's the set of interview questions I need to ask that person I'm going to hire. All these things start to emerge. And I don't think I'm a unicorn in that happening in rest. I think my unicornness is in that I actually prioritize rest. Someone asked me the other day, said, well, what's your main practice that ensures that you rest? And I said, I decided I would be saying yes to some rest practice every single day for the rest of my life, period. That's the rest practice before the rest practice. Like a lot of us, we have standing engagements that nothing gets in the way of, but most of those engagements don't have anything to do with restoring or replenishing ourselves. And that feels incredibly unsustainable and ultimately unfulfilling to me. Um, so rest supports the doing of the dream. Also, when you move from this kind of still place or this rested place, I find a simplicity in the how emerges. And so you're more efficient. I tell people, I'm like, like the word efficient doesn't seem like it goes with rest. But I'm like, I have one client who's always like, I don't want to use that word, like efficient. I'm like, efficient is my other favorite word, right? Like, I'm like, again, I can seem like way out there and very woo, but I'm like, rest stays me energy. Have you ever lost something? I lost something in my purse yesterday, lost something in air quotes. And you're headed out, you're already a little bit, you're feeling like you're late, you're rushed. So now you start pulling everything out of the purse, you dump something out. Now you're looking in the laundry room, you're in a hurry, moving frantically, trying to find the thing. Do you give up, which causes you to slow down, which may also cause you to come to a halt. And suddenly you remember exactly where the thing is. Like for me, I'm like, instead of having the chaos happen first, now I just go, oh, let me just slow down, come to what seems like a halt, ground myself, and remember before the chaos. Like that's my little silly example of how stopping. We weren't going to find the thing in the frenetic movement. We were only going to remember where the thing was when we slowed down and stopped. But we'd already wasted time digging through everything, freaking out about everything. Um, I'm sure you've never done that, Nicole, but I have experiences like that. And those little daily moments remind me of the necessity of slowing down and engaging the pause and how it can save me energy and time versus take from.
Well, you've said so many resonant things, and I love the purse example because it is true, right? We have to pause. And our temptation is always just to be like, oh yeah. I mean, I leave the house in a rush all the time, Octavia. I'm always like, oh my gosh, I can't find all my stuff. I got to get going. And how to, taking that space. But I would say for you too, I love that you also, just going back to what you said about the definition of rest, includes more. It's anything that restores or grounds you. Because I think about that too. And I also really love being efficient. It's like one of my favorite things. And my
Mm,
intention always with people is to like, how can you actually get more connected, more grounded? Because then you aren't actually so
mm,
spun out and working so much. Because a lot of what's spinning us
yes.
out is that we're not connected and then we're just doing,
Mhm,
doing, doing versus giving yourself that
mhm,
moment. Because for me, rest is more like it is meditation, but it's actually also making sure I'm taking
mm,
walks twice a day, resetting myself. Because that's a lot of times
mhm,
where I also, too, like in yoga practices or at the gym or when I'm on a walk, is when I
mm,
actually hear what to do as well, when I can't figure something out,
mm.
versus when
That's
I'm
right.
at my computer trying to problem solve something. It's like that's when I get stressed and like I get overactivated. And then I have to take the break and that pause
Mm,
in my own day to say, okay,
mm,
this is not going to solve it, go out there. But I get lots of
mm,
insight. Like I wrote one book on like the intro to one of my books on a hike because it was just coming to me as I was out in nature. And so I was like
mm,
writing it on notes just to make sure I didn't miss the main big pieces of it. So I'm curious, yeah, because I'm curious because for you, it sounds like then rest
mm,
is like a built-in way for you to actually be tuned in and to actually be efficient around the things that you're here to do to follow
mhm,
those big dreams.
mhm. Yes, I love that. I love that. And it sounds like what I hear you talking about is like, how do you access your flow state? I'm not a flow state expert in like not the slightest bit. I know people who are, but I'm like, yep, like you stepped right into the flow and there's some effort to get into the state that supports the flow. But once you're in it, there was an effortlessness and there's efficiency in and you have to start getting people have to start getting clear on like what supports me getting into that state because there's going to be some lifting, there's going to be some efforting to get there. And like for me, I've discovered that in the practices that I previously named, and I've written 2 books since 2020. And and every time people ask me like what's your secret or you should do a workshop on writing, and I actually did one recently, and I had to tell them at the beginning, I said, I might disappoint you because my process is lay down, rest. I'm going to guide you through a really specific and curated vision to get to the well of what I call the writer's heart. And then write after that. That is my entire process. I'm like, I wrote these 2 books from meditating, practicing yoga nidra. Sometimes I would go on walks with no destination. I just would kind of time it. It takes me about 20 minutes to enter into that place where, okay, I feel very clear and I can access my creativity or more of my thoughts, like what's underneath my thought. And I'm like, that's how I've done it. Can probably deconstruct that more. There's probably more to it, but maybe there's not. It's like I did the things that support me being rested and restored, and that allowed me to have access to another layer of myself and my thinking and my creativity. And then I wrote it down. like I'm like, that's the process, y'all. But the real key is that in writing mode, I do that every single day until I'm done. Right? Like it's like I do that, or I do if it's Monday, Wednesday, Friday that I do it, then I do that. I don't let something else take precedent.
Well, I love that what you were saying, and that was actually what I'm curious about is how to create that boundary with it because I'm actually looking at writing my next book too and I was like, oh, lay down and then write, that sounds perfect. I will totally do that. I'm going to lay on the ground in the office or wherever and then I'll get up and write.
Well, for you, it might be hiking. It's just, we
Mm.
also have to be curious enough about ourselves, in relationship enough with ourselves to start to go, what are those things for me? You know? Like, because I don't know what it is for you. I wholeheartedly believe in the power of yoga nidra and restorative yoga, so I am going to cape for that. But I could be wrong about what it is for you, you know?
Well, I like the idea of doing that, laying down on the ground first. Well, and then I'm curious because you did say also, and you alluded to this, that there are certain things that we do no matter what because we know. And what has helped you really be firm in those boundaries? Because I feel like also a lot of people who are overstimulated or have a lot of dreams or really scattered or distracted have a hard time with
Mm.
that tuning inward because it requires a boundary, right, of some sort to set.
Mm.
And it's something I haven't seen you speak about it a lot, and I'm curious how you set that for yourself.
How I set the inner boundary.
The inner boundary and with the outer world, because I know you have a business
Mm.
and family, and there's so many demands on everyone's time in these days. And so how do you think of it for yourself, and how do you maintain it?
Hmm. Um, that's a, I won't say it's a hard question. I feel very clear on what really matters. And I, and part of this is I've lost a lot of important people in my life. And when you have an hour to get to the ICU and you have that kind of experience, you really start to understand what's urgent and what is not. And for the most part, something coming through email is not urgent on the life level urgent. And that seems way out there. And it doesn't mean I don't acknowledge, honor emails. I'm like the most responsive person you will meet at 24 hours. I'm going to get back to you most of the time, or you're going to know I'm not going to get back to you. Um, and just like, so part of it is just like a clarity around like what's urgent. And also having my son help me to be like, oh, some of this stuff that I think is urgent it is not urgent. Does it involve someone's like well-being, life, um, all of these things? That's urgent to me. And the other thing, Nicole, that I've said, like all my friends have heard me say this, like focus is my superpower.
Mm.
And it has been. And I could have 20 things laid out in front of me to do, and I will go do the one thing, then move to the next thing. Do the second thing, then move to the next thing. And that is a boundary for me. I can't tell you how I set it. I probably had some traumatizing experience of not having that. And the pain of that experience made me go, oh, I have to figure something else out. Um, but again, I don't like wasting time. I don't like the feeling of inefficiency and being all over the place. Like I just did not like that feeling. And so and so I found a way to stave that feeling off through focusing. The other thing is that I batch how I work a lot, right? You know, unless I'm in like a full on, I'm gonna turn this book in a month. I might be writing on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. And then when I'm doing that in 60 to 90-minute blocks, then taking a 20-minute break. Like it's like I'm that kind of person that does that. And the other thing about a boundary is not for the external world, it's for you to know how you're going to respond when it's challenged or and I think about things that I'm going to say that I want to say yes to, being clear on what my yeses are, being clear on like what's my yes about this year helps me to be clear on when something's not in the realm of that yes. And I really generously just say no. But I guess what you're asking me is like, well, how do you get to that point? I got to this point through great suffering. I didn't come to being a devotee to rest in a leisurely way. I had around the time that we knew each other, maybe before or slightly after, I had this experience of being hospitalized for like a physical injury, for dehydration and extreme fatigue. Like I physically could not go on anymore without getting hydrated and medicated and support from a hospital for 4 days. Right. So I had an experience like that, you know how they say God will whisper and then it becomes a scream. Like I'm living my life in this really unsustainable way before this screen, this cosmic screen comes and says, "Hey, what are you doing? You can't live like this anymore." And so for me, the threat of returning to being that kind of unwell in my relationship to self and boundary wakes me up every day with awareness of what my yes and what my no is, to be honest. And so part of my work is, and part of my rest is like, I don't want or think that people have to have that level of burnout or breakdown to come into more right relationship with themselves and with their engagement around productivity and doing and all of those things. At least I believe that we don't all have to have some cosmic scream to say, "Hey, you are not okay." Um, the other thing is I ask for help, right? Like within the context of my, and this is a big thing. I said it kind of casually, but it's a big thing. Because the women who raised me could do all things in air quotes, right, at a great price, right? And so I'll give you the example of just the equity in my marriage, right? I I can't say there's an equal split of labor, but what happens in my marriage and in my parenting with another is if I can't do it, you do it. That seems very basic, but I know so many women. Like my son's out of school today. And when I scheduled this, I don't know that I remembered that he wasn't, that he was not going to be at school at, the time on a Monday afternoon. And I have so many peers who they're high achieving. They have their own businesses. They contribute to their households in profound and meaningful ways. And every time something happens in the household or with the child, if they have a child, or even the pet, they have to attend to it. And for me, I'm just like, well, that's not going to be my life. There's a clear boundary in my most intimate relationships around when I need support, how I need that support. But I also have had to do a lot of inner work to be able to receive it and not feel like I'm failing because I need, want, and desire and ask for that support. Um, I really do love this question, a boundary, a boundary, you know,
Yeah.
because it's ongoing. Like I don't have it all figured out. What is more clear to me is what's a yes, right? What's a no? What's a not now? What's a maybe? And being honest about those kinds of things. And sometimes I walk myself into stuff because I get to work with people I really love and I do things that I'm really excited about. And sometimes that excitement will lead me to be like, yes, I'll do all the things. And I also hold the value of I want to show up really deeply and fully and very present for people. And that ethic also helps me maintain a boundary that will allow me to actually do that. And so sometimes I have to walk myself out of some of the things I've said, when I realize I can't really show up at the level that I want to or that really requires because I've said yes to too many things. Right. So I'm in this ongoing, honest conversation with myself, um, about what I can do, what I need support to do, what I ain't fitting to do. Meaning that's just not gonna happen. Um, but it's a thing. Like women have to be for women to set boundaries. It's very. I have not lived in any other body, so I can't speak on it. But I'm like, the world tests our boundaries. Like we say no. Oh, you didn't really mean no. Or we present a no. Maybe we don't say it with our mouth, but the stance is no. It gets overwritten, and I'm like, so for us, it can start to feel like that person's so radical in her no or in her yes. But I'm like, the conditioning and the the norm for women is your answer is yes before I ask you. So if we're not in this dialogue around what our yes, no, maybe I need more time, whatever it is, with ourselves, the world already has the answer prepared for us, you know. Um, but so in the vein of self-worth, I have also just decided that I'm worthy of my own time and care, which sounds very simple. And um, it's not simple. You know, it's been like all the somatic therapy, all of the coaching, all of the practices, the journaling, the reflecting, the, tearful conversations over wine with girlfriends. So many things have gotten me to the point to go, oh, yeah, you matter to you too. Mm.
Well, what you said to me, I love how, the conversation, it's actually really simple. I love that you just decided that you are worthy of time and care. We make it to be this whole thing, but you can just decide that you get to have some time for yourself every day. Like I know it seems so revolutionary. And then when you said it, I was like, yeah, I know. Why don't people just decide that they just get to do it? And it doesn't mean,
Mm,
we own our own businesses, but you don't have to own your own business to like decide that you
no,
have time for yourself every day, that you give it to yourself. Even if you've got kids and a family, like you could actually just decide and have
I
more
know.
space.
It is simple and profound. And sometimes I want to say that, and then I remember the me that was hospitalized for, you know, breakdown, burnout, everything 10, 12 years ago. And she intellectually knew she could decide. She didn't trust it.
Right.
Because I remember being in the hospital, and my husband's a very grounded and content person. I know that's part of why we're together. Because there's this part of me that can be like very like chasing. Like I go out there and he never has, he rarely practices asana, I'll say, but I always go, you're the greatest yogi, and I remember being in the hospital, and you would think that the first day I was there, you would think that I would go, oh wow, I'm in a crisis. I was thinking, oh wow, I'm missing work. I'm a burden to my coworkers. I'm letting people down. And so I'm sobbing, not because I'm in the hospital, but because of what I couldn't do because I was in the hospital. And my husband held my hand. He said, please stop. Please stop. And he just was like, there is no judgment in this, but what is going on with you? Like, do you see where you are? And you were talking about, I have to finish my work. And so I'm saying that to say, like, he said to me, you get to decide. I am here. I'll do it. But then I'm crying some more, but I don't want to be a burden. And so like there was some in the yoga, the term is vicopa, some deep lie, some illusion operating underneath the surface that I have really like a knot that I've had to be intentional about untangling myself from. And also decide. Like, I think someone listening to this, like, we got the lesson for you. Maybe that was part of it. Like, I've been doing all that untangling, but to sit here and say to you, like, just decide that you are worthy of your time and your care, you know? And it can be that simple for someone else.
Well, I feel like, the rock bottom situation doesn't have to occur if we can start to
Mm,
untangle the things that are blocking us before that point.
mm,
And I see that too, because many women come to me also where after they've been through some rock bottom moment, and I've been through many of
mm,
those myself. And how do we start to say, oh, like I'm willing to put in some time today
mm,
to untangle that
mhm,
versus
mm,
going until I'm crying in a hospital bed and not being
mhm,
willing to
mhm,
see the truth that's in front of me. And that's what I'm hearing from you.
Mm,
And I feel like, the decision is simple. And then the work that it takes after that decision is persistent and consistent and
yes.
over again,
Yeah.
so that you can actually
Yeah.
have the receiving side, which is the worthiness, and what you were saying,
Yeah.
being able to receive help, which is a whole other conversation we could get into. We would need another hour for that one, but it is a big thing for women to start to receive help too. And I've had to learn that practice a
Versus
lot.
be the help.
Yeah. I'm the one
Yeah,
who's
to
always,
receive the help
yeah,
versus be the help. Um,
yeah. Yeah. Well,
mm,
Octavia, it's been such a, you and I could talk forever. It's such a beautiful conversation. It really is. And really profound, because I feel like so much of what you're saying is really simple. And then the practice of putting it in can be more
mm,
challenging. And at the same time, I think the simplicity is really important for all of us to remember on a daily basis, that you are worthy of
mm,
receiving time and care. And that, if you can really make that what you focus on every day, that is when your life starts to
mm,
expand and you actually have more time and space. You're more focused, you're more effective. All the things that we want on a more surface level actually come true when you give yourself this deeper space for yourself. So I'm so grateful for this
mm,
conversation we've had. And I'd love for
mm.
people to know the best way to reach you. I know your book, your most recent book, is out, which I loved. I read both of them. They're really beautiful practices, and her words are so
Mm.
beautiful. So I'd love for you to share what's the best way to connect with you.
Yeah, you can connect with me at octaviaraheem.com or on Instagram as Octavia Raheem. I know, it's so straightforward.
So simple. And then go buy her books because they're beautiful. They really are. Like,
Yeah,
if
go, go buy the books. Let them be companions, right? Because what I do know is that community can hold us accountable, can support us as we. So you make this declaration today: I'm worthy of my care in my own time. Don't get your girlfriend, your sister, your partner, like enroll someone else in witnessing you in that and witnessing themselves in that. And so for me, these books I've written, I'm like, well, sometimes we feel alone. And I'm like, well, let these books be your companion. Like it is very powerful and important to have companions as you try to, as you do, untangle yourself from the knots of unworthiness, you know. So you could do that with the book or do that with a peer, do that with this podcast, right? Having companions along the way that remind you and reflect the possibilities on the other side of your persistence, your consistence, your disruption, because it's gonna disrupt some things when you decide that you're worthy and start to act like it, and live like it.
So beautifully said. Her books are so beautiful. You can just open a page and read it and feel that companionship. So go check them out. Pause, Rest, Be is the most recent one. And so thank you so much, Octavia, also for being here and being this conversation. And I felt really just your presence and your connection. And I love being able to come back and connect this way a decade after we begin. So I am so grateful for you.
Thank you so much, Nicole. I'm grateful to be here.